Top of the morning to you all. Yes, I know. I have my top hat on today, and quite honestly, where else can a guy wear a top hat these days and not get looked at kind of funny, kind of weird, and like, what century did he come from? So anyhow, as the title is stating, I want to talk a little bit about brass frames and chain fires. And there's a lot of dialogue on YouTube in this community regarding both topics. I want to first talk about brass frames. And as I had mentioned in a previous video, the third black powder revolver I ever purchased was an 1851. If I remember correctly, I think they call it the Rebel model. It was the brass frame, but it was in .44 caliber. And knowing the nature of brass, I never exceeded the manufacturer's recommendation of more than 18 grains. And after I purchased the gun, took it out, shot it several times, what I had noticed, and I'm going to be using my 51 Navy to show and point to the issues that I had. After a little amount of time on both sides of the frame, it started developing cracks right down through here. Okay, both sides developed cracks right here, and there was a linear crack on the inside also that went across the frame. Well, obviously that's bad casting. But being in the equipment rental business, I learned how to weld, braze, and everything else. So what I did is I took a small thin grinder and I ground out the cracks on both sides of the frame. Then I went back through with brazing rod and welded them back in with brass, cleaned it up, and everything was fine. There wasn't a whole lot that I could do with the inside. But I took a chance and took the gun out, shot it multiple times. I thought I had fixed the issue. And within a couple more months, whatever, I noticed that it started cracking again. And in my opinion only, and that's why I mentioned in a previous video, when you're dealing with brass, you better know what you're dealing with, because brass very easily can have bad casting. They may look super fantastic on the outside, but the inside, it's where the bad casting is going to start. Your cracks are going to start and things like that. Now, I do know that there's some dialogue out there talking about brass frame stretching and all this other thing. I've never experienced that because I never had a brass frame long enough to have that happen. What happened to me is, as I described, it started cracking right in through here. Now, how did I resolve that after welding it and it started cracking a second time? I went to my gun dealer, and at the time, this particular gun store in the town that I lived in, they were allowing me to sell Thompson maxi balls and also my hand-tied fishing flies. So it was, for me, it was just nature to go to them and have them order a steel frame. And they did. And obviously the arbor didn't come with it, but the arbor and the brass frame was steel, and it was case hardened. So when I got that frame, that's when I bought my container of caseinite, and that's when I started case hardening parts and things like that. So being in the equipment rental business, I had access to torches and all this other type of stuff. So with 2 rosebuds, I was able to heat up the frame, quench it in the, dip it in the caseinite, and do that entire process, reinstall the arbor, and the gun shot fine after that without any issues. And as I explained in a previous video, due to family responsibilities, I ended up having to sell that gun in time. So that's really been my only experience with a brass framed revolver, and I'm attributing it to bad casting. Now, I do know when people talk about frames stretching, when you look at these brass frames, as you would a regular steel framed revolver, let me pull the wedge out of this one, my 60 Army, and I'll kind of point to it. There's a, let me get here, fingers don't want to quite pick up the needle, the pointer. This little ring right here, this is actually the stop, the cylinder, and every time you shoot, the cylinder goes back and it works back and forth. Well, in time, because that little ring right there is brass, and brass is typically softer, that ring is gonna flatten out. You're going to lose your cone to cylinder gap, and in my opinion only, like I said, I've never wore out a brass frame because the only one I had was the one I described earlier, but this ring, in my opinion, is the cause of these frames stretching out, because you have a steel cylinder hitting a soft metal every time you shoot. That's my opinion as to why these frames wear out. In time, mind you, in time. Now, whether today's metallurgy regarding brass is better than it was in the early 80s, I can't speak to that. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about chain fires. Now, there's some information on YouTube as to what causes them, whether they come out of the front, whether they come from the back. There's a couple of good channels that test those theories. The Old Ranger is one of them, and also the channel Everything Black Powder. If you go to their channel, you can scroll through the thumbnails or the titles, and you'll be able to readily identify which ones I'm referring to. But what I want to talk about is the one and only time I have ever had a chain fire with a cap and ball revolver. Now, at the time, I was managing a equipment rental yard in Flagstaff, Arizona, and at the end of the day, myself and a couple other the employees would go out to the gravel pit and do some shooting. And I'd always take my black powder revolvers. And this particular occasion, I was out by myself. No one else could go this particular evening. So I loaded up the revolver with Pyrodex. I don't remember what the grain charge was. And as usual, I put a felt wad between the powder charge and the round ball. And like I've mentioned before, I don't view these wads as a delivery system for lubrication, although that is a purpose. I view them more as a gas check. Okay. And I was shooting a 4.5 round ball. Spear was the company I was buying my round ball at the time. And there again, this was the early 80s, I should say about early 90s actually. And it was pretty cheap shooting. You know, you could buy a bag of ox yoke wonder wads for like $1.99 and a box of round ball for $4.99, and a tin of caps was like $1.99, so it was pretty cheap shooting. Well, anyhow, I loaded the gun up, cocked it, dropped the hammer, and the chain fire began. Now, one would think when I mentioned chain fire, every cylinder went off simultaneously. Didn't happen. It went boom, 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 till all 6 cylinders shot. Now, I was shooting number 11 percussion caps, pinch the cap a little bit to seat on the nipple. But I had done that 100,000 times prior and never had a chain fire. Never had a chain fire. And the extent of the damage to the revolver was the round ball that came out from the bottom of the chamber that lines up with the loading lever. It blew the loading lever off. I lost the dovetail, the latch, but that was the extent of all 6 cylinders going off at once. Everything ended up going down alongside the barrel. You know, I could see lead, a lead mark on both sides of the wedge. Just that. And what caused it? I don't have a clue. Maybe all the stars in the heavens were lined up properly at that exact moment, and that's when my chain fire happened. Fortunately, the screw bent just a little bit, but I did lose the dovetail, and I had to reorder that. I got that, fit it back onto the revolver, loaded it up, and of course your first instinct is it gonna do it again? It never did. So I don't know what actually caused that particular chain fire. Fortunately, there wasn't anybody with me that particular day, because who knows where those pieces of lead, shrapnel, flew. So I just kind of wanted to put that, onto this channel in case somebody might have some ideas as to what happened. There wasn't any storm approaching, so I can't attribute it to some sort of static, current in the air at that right moment. I don't know. I just flat out don't know. And it was definitely a scary thing to have happen. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there, see if anybody has any thoughts as to what may have caused that. And go back and watch those other videos on those other two channels I had mentioned before, Old Ranger and Everything Black Powder. Because there again, does it really come from the front? Does it come from the back? Well, I'm inclined to believe that it all comes from the front. With that being stated, I have a hard time believing that also, because I've always used a felt wad, and that felt wad is supposed to completely seal that chamber off. So on that particular day, how did all 6 go off in succession? Boom, 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 boom. To me, that doesn't make any sense. So anyhow, friends, I hope that you will share this video with your bestest of buddy, and I hope that everybody will have gotten through the laughs with the top hat. And I hope you all have a great day. Thank you for liking and subscribing, and we'll catch you the next time around. And I'm hoping within the next day or two I can get out and do a little bit of shooting with the Cabela's 54 caliber just to see how it shoots. So we'll catch you next time around. Bye.